Welcome to Explore Parenting Growth, the channel where we help parents confidently guide their children towards success in life and career. Each week, we bring you real conversations, proven strategies, and inspiring stories to strengthen your parenting journey. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Ryan Erbe, Assistant Professor of Character and Psychology at West Point, where he helps develop future military leaders in discipline, character, and resilience. He spent years as an educator and ministry leader focused on helping people grow into the best version of themselves. And he's also a husband as well as father of four. Ryan brings a powerful perspective on what it really takes to build strong, capable, high character kids, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with him. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, really happy to be on the show and contribute whatever I can to the conversation.
Yep, sounds good. So I'm gonna kind of get right into it. I know when we just where I just did the intro, and you currently work for West Point Military Academy, and so I know you interact with a whole lot of cadets. And one of the areas that I just kind of want to touch on just right out the gate is where or how do you see parents misapply discipline in ways that may not actually build character?
Yeah, starting off with a great question. Lots of ideas come to mind with that. I think that one thing that's at the root of that, in terms of where parents can go wrong, I'll just say up front, by no means am I professing to be a perfect parent or somebody that has all the answers. I think I'm preaching to myself here as well.
Hmm.
But I think that one thing that can go wrong or where parents miss out is in the realm of being intentional and thought out in terms of their discipline plan, how they approach that, and really thinking about, well, what's my goal here with enacting this particular form of discipline, and that can be sort of a broad plan, but also thinking very situationally. What's my goal? Is it to just correct this behavior in the moment because I'm annoyed or I'm frustrated,
Hmm.
or is it I'm trying to benefit my child now, and also thinking down the road and how that shapes their character. And by character, I mean their consistent ways of being, especially in a moral and ethical sense. So, am I
Yeah.
a good person interpersonally? That takes thought and that takes intentionality. It takes a lot of, well, honest assessment and humility. Well, I messed up here. Let me get back on track. Let me course correct, and think about their long-term benefit, not just what benefits me in the moment. So those are some things
Sure.
that come to mind right off the bat. Yep.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it can be challenging as a parent myself. And now my son's a little bit older. He's 21, almost 22. But thinking back to when he was probably in his early teens, middle school area. I mean, middle school age as well. It can be difficult to kind of think long term. But I agree, long term, if you kind of plan it out, it'll help and shape the way you discipline your kids. Thanks. I really appreciate that insight. Um,
Yeah, and one other quick thing I just say
sure.
is that, sort of one thing that contributes to that is the lack of time that we have, and really the lack of time that we take to think about these things. I mean, and my kids are younger, so 11, 9, 7, and 4,
Hmm.
and I already feel like life is beyond me. I just don't have the time to do the
Yeah.
things that and really spend the time to think about these things. But I think just taking the time every so often to revisit such an important element of life and parenting. I mean, arguably the most important element of parenting, thinking about discipline broadly, not just correctional
Hmm.
activities, but also activities that are meant to promote the great aspects of our
Yeah.
children. We live in a very fast paced, time consuming culture. So we've got to take the time to think about these things and relatedly be intentional about them.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Now, I know obviously being at West Point, you work with just high performing cadets, but also I'm sure high performing peers as well.
Mhm.
Um, where do you see performance outpacing character, and what does that impact have?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think that even in my own life, because so much of what is rewarded in life and prioritized and held up in life is performance. To include, and performance is important. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that performance is not important, um, but when it gets prioritized, and I think in what you're asking is outpacing or becoming, yeah, prioritized or more important than character, um, that becomes really problematic because we're going to fail, we're going to underperform, we're going to not perform as well as the person next to us.
Hmm.
And when those things happen and we're not living up to, our own performance standards, then our lives can crumble. But if we approach these things with, character formation in mind, how is this growing my character? Well, that changes the game because our performance failures can be an important part of, I mean, getting better performance wise, but also alongside of that, in my view, more importantly, can be important character developmental opportunities. And, I just say, when I think about West Point, we want high performers, and we certainly
Sure.
um, look for that and prioritize that. But the core of our mission statement is to build leaders of character. Now, inherent in that idea of a leader is someone who performs, but character is specifically named. And I think that the two go hand in hand. I mean, there's a whole perspective on this idea of performance virtues or performance character. But my larger point is that when you're focused on the character element as the priority, then the performance is going to get there, especially when you think about things like resilience or
Hmm.
grit and toughness. I mean, I think these are facets of character that can happen when we don't perform. And ultimately, when we engage those or we develop those, then we can get to the level of performance that we're capable of,
Yeah.
which may be different than the person next to us. But I think you see what I'm saying there.
Yep, for sure. And it made me think about where we kind of see this in society in general, or at least it's talked about. It could be with an athlete. Okay, this athlete has performed well his entire life, but maybe his character wasn't addressed. Or sometimes even in corporate America, you can have someone. Okay, they make the company a lot of money, but they're difficult to be around, difficult to work with. It just seems like character definitely has to be a focus, especially for kids when they're developing. So it may not lead to those other challenges as they get older. So
Yeah, and I think one of the points that you're bringing out is the importance of, eventually, if the character is not developed or focused on, it's going to affect the person, and by virtue of being on a team, it's going to affect the team,
yeah,
and those character flaws are going to come out in whatever setting a person finds themselves, and it's going to be unfortunately detrimental to the team. And then there's a whole host of other issues that come alongside of that, interpersonal issues, but team performance, those things will be affected. And so again, they're very much related, both need to be focused on. But I think to your point, character can get dismissed or uh, decreased,
yeah,
de-elevated, so to speak,
yeah,
and that becomes very problematic.
yeah. Now, in terms of the cadets that you work with, I'm sure they come from many different backgrounds and different life experiences. But is it possible, or maybe you can tell me if you have noticed with the different cadets in terms of their parenting that they come from? Like, All right. Can you tell if some of the parenting they've received has been overbearing or hands off or some, balanced parenting? Have you seen that or have you experienced that with some of the kids? Can you kind of point that out in their behaviors or in their character?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do, by virtue of being over there, get to work very closely with cadets. One system that is in place there is this PDR system. So as an instructor, you get assigned a percentage, a small percentage of your cadets. Well, actually, it's about 6 or 7 cadets each
Hmm.
semester, um, to do a leadership developmental review. And so this is more of an intimate experience, so to speak, just in terms of getting to know them on a deeper, more personal level. You have conversations about different aspects of their leadership, enable them to reflect on that, and then you help support that. And so, but I wouldn't say that I've seen a consistent type of parenting style come about in the cadets. I think most people would imagine that because of where they are, there's a lot of cadets that come from military families that you'd think that,
Hmm.
well, there's more overbearing parenting happening, which may be true. I just haven't come across that as much. We
Sure.
don't always get into or consistently get into how they were parented. Again, sometimes that comes up, but I mean, and this is where it gets a little tricky, and this could take us down a whole other road. But
Yeah.
I think there can be a tendency as adults or even college age students to feel like, well, I was parented in a certain way, so that's why I am as I am. And so, kind of
Mm.
this like, well, I'm going to blame my circumstances. No, don't get me wrong. Parenting really matters. But as many kids that I've seen that have come up in difficult circumstances and not do well, I've seen kids come up in difficult circumstances and do well. And by difficult circumstances, I'm saying parenting that was less than ideal,
Sure.
we'll
Yeah.
say. And
Yeah.
I think that there's a whole host of reasons as to why people develop in the way that they do. I think parenting is a really important part of that, but there's a whole lot more to the story, including personality traits. And
Yeah.
so um, I think it's hard to pinpoint. Okay, here's a cadet. They're displaying these outcomes, and this is due to the way that they were parented. Again, I think that matters, but there's a lot of variables at play, and so it's really hard to sort of pinpoint one and say, well, these cadets that I'm seeing were parented in this way, and so this has led to X, Y, and Z outcome.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Thank you. So, my next question is why do you think that high performing kids often struggle emotionally, even when they seem to be successful, even outwardly and in how they're performing?
Yeah, I think that can happen for a multitude of reasons. I think the thing that initially jumps out at me is I think high performing kids can struggle emotionally if their identity, which is this is very easy to do, and I think this has happened to me different points in my life. I've seen this in a number of people. Again, I
Hmm.
think it can easily happen. Is when um, their performance is impacting their identity, or another way to say that is that their identity is bound up in their performance. So I'm only worthy or valuable to the extent that I'm performing. And high performing kids they can get away with that for a while.
Yeah.
Get away with that meaning they can perform at a very high level, and not have that identity tied up with my performance exposed. And we see that happen, or we can see that happen at a high performing institution like West Point, for example, when cadets come in, they recognize, oh, I'm not the only high performer in the
Yeah.
world. There are people around me that perform better than I do in a number of instances. And so when they're exposed to that or they fail for the first time, there's a number of instances where that happens. This can happen outside of West Point, but
Yeah.
when they fail for the first time, and they see that as, oh, like, who am I now if
Hmm.
I'm not performing at this high level? I think that's one core reason why they can struggle emotionally versus the cadet or the young person who recognizes that there's so much more than their performance. Their performance is an element of who they are. It's not the most important element of who they are. And they're loved and valuable regardless of whether or not they fail. There's a different set of outcomes that are associated when they do fail, or they recognize that people around them are equally as gifted or can equally perform as they do. And in that instance, they can recognize and value the exceptional abilities of the people around them.
Yeah.
So not necessarily just, well, my sense of self is broken down because I've failed. It's a, wow, I'm more than my performance, and I recognize that about this person over here, and I can value them for the things that they accomplish, and not feel like that's a threat to who I am in my value.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Something I wonder about is at a place at like West Point where we just talked about high performers, but it also comes with a lot of pressure as well. How do you guys help with the cadets, coping with that in terms of, making sure they're not getting overly stressed or, working towards some type of release in order to, deal with the pressures that comes with that? It could be meditation, it could be something else. What are some of the things that you guys and I guess encourage the cadets to do? I know you don't necessarily force them to do it.
Yeah, I think back to the prior question is really develop these strong relationships with the cadets and reinforce the idea that you are valuable because you are a human being. It is not
Hmm.
based on whether or not you even continue at West Point. We hope that you do. We hope that you do great things for
Yeah.
the institution and for the country, but you are more important than that. And to me, that's a core way of dealing with the pressures and all the things that come alongside of being a high performer. So I think that's primary. I think, so relatedly, it is like learning good time management skills
Hmm.
and learning to prioritize the most important things in life. Your performance and your leadership abilities, those things are really important. But the things that fuel that are things like your connection to a higher power. So your religiosity, your spiritual beliefs. So encouraging taking time for that. Personal time to just think deeply about life, to meditate, to pray, the things that enable them to do and be the great people that they are.
Yeah.
So those are some things. And I mean, you mentioned meditation. I think a lot of times we think of meditation solely as this way to calm down and to de-stress, and that is certainly important. But another way that it helps there, and really all of our ability to manage stress, is it helps us to orient our attention on the things that really matter, and relatedly, be able to orient our attention
Hmm.
in the direction that we want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
orient it. I mean, talk about a time, and I think this has happened throughout history. You see this in a number of different cultures, issues with attention. But I think in particular now there are a number of reasons why that can be very difficult. And so just being able to regulate your attention, which can be trained in many ways, but
Yeah.
meditation is a great way to do that, helps to alleviate stress, helps us to form character. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
huge aspect of that's character forming, but also helps us to focus on the most important things that we need to, that in the grand scheme of things, one outcome of that is to help people de-stress and not feel the pressure as much as they might otherwise.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now, we had a previous conversation and we were talking about the shift towards gentle parenting. And I, what would like for you to share just, your perspective and why do you think, there's been a shift in towards that, and what do you think is driving it, and where do you think it helps, and where do you think it could potentially hurt?
Yeah, this I think a lot about this one, just because I think about parenting and development quite a bit, uh, from everything from the way I grew up, and I
Hmm.
had amazing parents.
Yeah.
Love them very much, and recognize that they're a conglomeration of good things and things that are not so good, just like the rest of us are. And
Yeah.
um, so anyway, my point there is that I think about these things quite a bit, and the thing that one thing that has come up in um and really our culture, I think it's probably a worldwide phenomenon, as you said, is this idea of gentle parenting. There's been a lot of theorizing about where it's come from. um I think that part of it is this reaction to how people, and I hate to make a big generalization, but had been parented in the past, where
Hmm.
and maybe especially from fathers, probably especially from fathers having a more distant relationship with their fathers. Maybe their fathers could potentially have been absent, but maybe their fathers were overbearing, which there can be a tendency in fathers to do that. And so, as a reaction to that, seeing, well, there are some detrimental outcomes as a result of that, fully
Yeah.
acknowledge that. I think the pendulum may have swung in the other direction, if you
Hmm.
can sort of dichotomize those things, to be more focused on, well, I don't want to do anything that's going to make my kid uncomfortable, hurt their self-esteem, affect them emotionally. I mean, I think it's no secret that we have a pandemic, or sort of a global epidemic of mental health issues among
Yeah.
young people. I mean, this has been understood from a variety of different angles. And I think, in part as a reaction to that as well,
Hmm.
there is this sense of, to borrow a term from Jonathan Haidt, the social psychologist, moral psychologist, coddling of the American mind. I mean, it's not just in parenting, right? You see this in educational settings, you see this in coaching, this concern, and rightfully so. I mean, we need to be concerned about that, but I'd say this over concern of, now I have to protect my kid, my athlete, my student from anything uncomfortable
Yeah.
that could happen. And the unfortunate consequence of that is that you do, in my view, and there's lots of research that supports this, you do much more damage, especially long term, than good. It is
Sure.
good for all of us to have to deal with difficult feelings, have to
Yeah.
deal with discipline, be corrected for things that just, we're sort of off base with. And so I think that there has been this shift in that direction. I think that that's some of the explanation around it. It's particularly problematic. We see in research that it's not good for kids for a number of reasons. I mean, some of which I mentioned, in that this parenting style, generally speaking, of authoritative parenting, this combination of gentleness, which I think gentleness is important. I think
Yeah.
warmth is important, but you need the firmness, the discipline, the sense of boundaries, the sense of correction when is necessary, to really have a well-rounded and holistic, positive development long term. We all need boundaries, and we
Yeah.
all need
Yeah.
to be disciplined in different ways, um, when we need that course correction.
Yeah, one thing that you said, or a few things you said, but one thing I'll point out in particular that kind of resonated with me is boundaries. Because what I've seen or listened to in terms of gentle parenting and the problems that can come from that, if you're leaning way to one side, I'll say, is you don't develop the boundaries that your child needs in order to function well in society. So when something difficult comes up, they don't understand, like, okay, this is how I handle this situation. They are used to, well, someone's going to come save me or rescue me, so I don't have to worry about any consequences as well. So that what you spoke there on boundary really stood out for me. So,
Yeah, and I think, I'll just say a little bit more about that. I mean, autonomy is an important developmental and emotional need for all of us.
yeah.
And I think that reflects a sense of love from a caregiver. But that said, I think in gentle parenting, I mean, one thing that can come about is a sense of, I'm going to allow my child to make all the decisions for themselves. And I'd
Hmm.
say that's a misguided perspective. I think
Yeah.
that young people need varying degrees and, more autonomy along the way. But alongside of that, they need us, sort of people that have navigated life successfully, to varying degrees,
Yeah.
um, what these guidelines look like for them.
Hmm.
And as they grab a hold of those, then you can they're showing themselves to be trustworthy or able to sort of embody and adopt those boundaries, so they can be trusted with those boundaries. Now they'll get outside of those every once in a
Sure.
while, so
Yeah.
they need some direction, but they need those guidelines and boundaries from us so that they can implement those and then work within those throughout the.
Gotcha. Yep. I want to kind of lean on, to some degree, your background as a minister and talk about character. Do you believe that character can be taught without a moral framework for it?
Um, yeah, this is um a question that I've been grappling with more recently. Um, and I don't have a fully formed idea yet. It's just
Sure.
something that I'm thinking through, and where I land on it is that there are different moral frameworks out there. And so, for example, one very prominent moral framework is an Aristotelian or neo-Aristotelian virtue ethics framework. And I apologize for using terms that may be unfamiliar to people, but Aristotle is a well-known Greek philosopher
Yep.
that is in many ways the originator of this idea of virtue ethics. And to some, and I don't mean to oversimplify it, but the idea is that to live a good moral and ethical life, we need to embody and habituate uh, moral ways of being that can be
Hmm.
summarized as virtues. Uh, that is a moral framework, and I'd say it's probably the most prominent moral framework. We use that at West Point, and I find it to be particularly useful.
Hmm.
And to speak a little bit to especially a Christian perspective,
Sure.
some people would say, well, Christianity, especially when you look at New Testament Christianity, they took virtue ethics and they just adopted it to fit their system, and that's one way to
Hmm.
view that. In my personal view, I believe that God, as the architect of life and the architect of morality, initiated this virtue ethics through Aristotle, and that it came to its fulfillment or completeness in the person of Jesus. And the New Testament Christians took that, they fully developed it, and
Yeah.
then they did that in a way that would resonate with some cultures around them, especially those that were more familiar with Greek philosophy and Aristotle
Mhm.
in particular, which was relatively well understood at that time. Um, so, so to back up a little bit, so I think that um, character can be taught with that type of moral framework. And again, there's other moral frameworks that can be used to teach it. My personal view is that it cannot be most effectively taught without the spiritual framework of what has been provided to us as human beings through the life of Jesus and in the
Mhm.
teachings of the Bible.
Gotcha.
I just think that, especially when we talk about spiritual matters and, for example, the Holy Spirit, not to get too far into that whole conversation, which could take us down an entirely different road.
Yeah.
Um, I can only do so much in developing habits within myself for my own purposes. I mean,
Yeah.
you can do a level of that. I believe that we've been created in that way. Um, but I can't do it most effectively without the guidance of Jesus and the help of the Holy Spirit. And so I think to summarize my answer to your question, I think there are some moral frameworks out there that can be helpful. And I
Yeah.
named one, an Aristotelian virtue ethics framework. But I think to fully develop as a human being, you need a spiritual framework, in particular, the moral framework of what Jesus provides for us and what we see in New Testament Christianity.
Gotcha. My last question, it may be a little bit difficult to boil it down to one thing. I'll just say that. So if you need to mention a couple of things, that's totally fine. But what should every parent, I should say, what should every parent make sure their child knows by the time they're 18 years old?
I mean, I would say related to that last question is that uh, th- there is a God,
Hmm.
there is a Savior, and uh, that God, that Savior, loves them so deeply for who they are. Uh, their Creator has gifted them in unique and very important ways to positively impact the world in the ways that only they can.
Hmm.
And I think that really speaks to everything that we've talked about so far, and sets them up for a life of success. Because if you believe and know that there is this immovable, unchangeable God, higher power, transcendent reality that created you, that loves you deeply, regardless of how you perform, that will enable you to perform
Yeah.
well and do all the other things that He's called you to do, and that has created you in such a unique and specific way to make an impact in the world that is well beyond yourself,
Yeah.
that is going to form you, that's going to shape you, that is going to be with you no matter what. Um, there is nothing that can stop a young person with that kind of belief, and it's not based on their own sense of here's what I think my purpose is, or
Hmm.
this is what I want to do with my life. It's based on something so much bigger than themselves. And from what I've seen, just in my own life, and as I interact with people that have that same understanding, those are the people that live fulfilling lives, that live a life of impact, and that are resilient, and
Yeah.
can bounce back from all the challenges. And there will be many challenges, as you know,
Yeah.
that will affect them. And that's just a healthy perspective for parents to have too for themselves. I mean, parenting is no joke. Like it is
Yeah.
a challenging endeavor beyond what I think any of us can anticipate. But when you adopt the perspective that God has called you to it,
Yeah.
and He's going to enable you to do it and to be great at it, um, that's a powerful thing that has me personally and people that I'm connected to gotten me through some really difficult times, and I anticipate will continue to help me to do that. So that'd be my input for parents, both from a help your kid understand that, but keep that perspective in mind as well. That'll be helpful.
Gotcha. Really, really good advice. And I thank you so much for your time today and giving us your insights and not just parenting, but also how you interact with, high performing kids who are, who are at West Point. It was really good, and I appreciate your time. Again, thank you, Dr. Ryan Erbe, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Corey. You too.